Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes. So this month, it's not about the money, Reverend Jill says. Oh, it is not about the money, but it is about the truth about spiritual prosperity. So what a delight that I get to kick off this important month. And I know that many of you are long-time spiritual seekers and practicers of science of mind and unity and new thought. And you know, if it's October, it is prosperity month, yes? And one of the things that's powerful if you've been around the spiritual teachings for a while is to see that we're always doing the same essential message. The nature of the divine is generous, infinite, loving. We replicate the nature of the divine, and therefore let's be about the business of living it in all areas, including our money. So that's basically the message. You agree? Yeah. All right, good. And yet, if you've been around it for a long time, what you'll notice is there is such richness and nuance and subtlety about how do we get caught or separated from our experience of abundance, and therefore it's worthy that every October or we come back and we do a prosperity series. So today I'm excited to pull the inspirations from the Brent Kessel book, It's Not About the Money. And I was thinking about, today's topic, which is the power of your money story. And I will be sharing with you a whole lot less about how do you get what you want, and a whole lot more about how do we be who we are. Yeah. And you catch the difference in those two things. So let's do it. Yeah. All right. So I wanted to begin with one of the Brent Kessel quotes that I think this one is so important to us to understand kind of where he's coming from. So what Kessel says is he says, the wanting mind is always creating an experience different from the one it has. The wanting mind is always creating an experience that feels different from the one it has. And the wanting mind is, I would say, at the core of our human life, and it's also at the core of our spiritual struggles. And this term comes from the Eastern Buddhist teachings, the idea of the mind that wants. So let's understand this a little bit, because it's useful for us to say, why is that a problem? I mean, isn't it good to want, I want good things for my kids and grandkids, and then I think, I want even better things for my kids and grandkids. Or I want good things for my spiritual center. I want even better things for my spiritual center. Or I want good things and more justice and more fairness in our politics. I want even more of that. There's something in us that's like, if some is good, more is better. Now, some of us have also struggled with if some is good and more is better, but that is a whole other talk, right? And that little bit of if some is good, more is better, therefore I want more, we start to go that can be problematic. Now, human bodies, we love to live. We want to survive. If left to our own devices, we will conserve calories and we will run from animals that want to eat us. And therefore, when things feel threatening to the human body, the want to survive feels both important and urgent. So bodies have a wisdom. And you all know this, if you've ever had an injury or a challenge in the body, you just marvel at the human body's desire for wholeness and returning to health. And, in some ways it's amazing. Or we've heard, tremendous stories of people's will to survive. It's a beautiful and inspiring thing. And yet, if that importance and urgency for survival gets caught up in our mentality, that's when it becomes the double-edged sword. So when Kessel refers to the wanting mind that is always craving for the thing that's not here right now, what that's about is this false idea that something that is not here, it's out there, and it's not now, it's later, but that something is going to be better than here and now, so that there and later, I'm going to be happier. And then we go get that thing there and later, and then what's interesting is we feel a moment of relief because for just a moment the wanting has stopped. It's really interesting, because that's really what he says the relief is. It's from the wanting finally being over. But then we think, now that the wanting's over, what's over there? And what's later? So, because I want that, and then we're like going after that thing. And Kessel uses a lot of examples which we as, spiritual folks here, we would be like, oh, we would never be those folks who, you want a 2,000 square foot house, and then you want a 3,500 square foot house, and then you need an addition. It's like, oh, like kind of like that kind of materialism. We recognize how empty that is, trying to always get more. But I will tell you as I really looked at this idea, I could see where the wanting happens in me, where I spiral up my opinions about what my life should be. And so sometimes you can see that, like, I'm never going to be satisfied can show up in a whole bunch of different ways. We find it painful when it's about money, and he makes a good case that it's not just about money or spending. For some people, it's, I want to save and then I never stop saving, or I feel like I want to go after a return and I keep going after a return. Or, like, it can just happen with money, that idea of wanting, getting, having a moment of relief, and wanting again brings us some pain. So have you all experienced some version of that pain? Yeah, okay, good. So at least I've got people going here. Good. So we're in the right place. And why does that become an opportunity for growth for us? And that's because the mechanism of the wanting mind will get caught up in something we call our money story. And the story we tell about our money creates our reality. And you can see, I think we've got the image of someone, we've got like, if you have a story about your money, which is there'll never be enough, things are hard for people like me, fill in the blank, because of fill in the blank about the economy, or fill in the blank about my past. Like, so things are hard, and therefore they're going to continue to be hard. And what it's been my experience is that for most people, we will unconsciously create the story of our money today based on our past. So notice, are you replicating the family story of money that you grew up with? Or maybe, on the other hand, you're rebelling against it. Like, it's almost always one of those two things. And it's really important to know, like, what is the story that underlies the thoughts and motivations, as well as the actions that you're taking with your money. Because when we know the story, we start to have more of a sense of empowerment over it. And one of the things Kessel talks about is the idea of a core story. And so he really says, you want to think about in your own money past, what were the important memories? What were the emotional experiences? Because those are the things that often will bring something strongly into our belief in our lives, and then we will have that be our story, and our story gets replicated. I also like to encourage you to really notice in your family of origin, or as you were coming up, what was the connection, if any, between spirituality and money. So I can remember I grew up in a, pretty sort of classic kind of middle class, like lower middle class and into middle class household. And my mom was hesitant to be a giver when it came to going we went to a church as we were coming up. And that like hesitancy to give continues to be with her over the decades, and I can see that it's like that's a story that she replicated. So what is it for you? You want to think about what's the core modeling or core story that I saw. I'm also thinking about my dad, who in some ways was a tremendously positive role model when it comes to money. So there's a book called The Millionaire Next Door that talks about how, mostly in the United States, many of people who are millionaires, which is a number we think is, either high or low, depending on what we think it is, but that many of them are people who, created wealth through like saving and through investing and that type of thing. And my dad was first generation Italian American, first to go to any kind of schooling, and he, over the course of 60 years, started just buying individual stocks by going to the library and reading about, price earnings ratios and stuff, and, amassed a nice portfolio. And he passed about a year ago. And it's been really interesting. It's like, there were many challenges with my dad, but I also now see all the positive things. And one of the challenges with him is, that kind of came to my core money story is, look, you can have what you want if you work hard and struggle. Okay, maybe it's not just me, okay? I see, okay, and it's good to know just exactly what's the core story. Mine is, you can have what you want if you work hard and struggle. And what I've noticed is, I've done pretty well to really break through that story, and we'll talk more about how you break through to create what you do want when it comes to money. But the place where it really still catches me, it's time. So he would also say, well, there you go. You showed up a day late and $1 short. And boy, you did not want to be a day late and $1 short. And it's that thing about and so what do I notice? Where's my wanting? It's always, I don't have enough time now, but maybe I'll have enough time later when whatever this is completed. And then I set up another this to there. So just notice whatever your core story is. And over the course of the next month, my encouragement is work with it. Work with it to compassionately understand it, and then to see how you can build and embody a new story. Because that's really what our teaching, the science of mind, is all about. So we brought an Ernest Holmes quote about belief and choosing. So this is what Dr. Holmes says. What is belief? It's a mental state. Therefore, we're correct when we say that if we can change the mental state, we can change the outward form. Our philosophy is not one of denying the reality of the external, but of affirming the reality of the invisible as the creator of the external. So belief can be changed, and what we do is we don't deny external circumstances, we affirm the reality that the invisible internal creates the external. And that's really the beauty of the science of mind teaching, is we say it's really two principles. One is love. God is all there is. There's one life, we're part of it. And then the second teaching is law, that thought, consciousness, creates experience. And so what this quote shows us is, if we want to shift experience, we want to get out of the wanting, hamster wheel of wanting, or we want to grow our spiritual center, or we want to pay off our debts, or save for the kids, or have a more just and inclusive world. Whatever our desire is, the way that we create it is always from the internal into the external, from the thought into the idea. So I wanted to show you a little bit about what I think about belief, because sometimes we think belief is just having the mental thought, but I really feel like belief is a combination. It's a pattern of consciousness. So belief is, yes, the content of the thought that we choose to think, combined with our emotional reaction to it. So thought and feeling, content and feeling. And then what also amplifies belief is conversation, which is why at the center, it's come on Tuesday nights. Because when you talk about and sit with people who care about these principles and are in conversation about it, you start to build the belief that you want to embody. So conversation also is part of what creates and anchors belief. And I will tell you, conversation is both the inner dialogue as well as what you listen to and who who you're following on Twitter and who are you in conversation with. So thought, emotion, conversation. And then this is important, held in place by repetition and intensity. So it's not the things that fleet through our minds that create our lives. It's the repeated, intense stuff that we interact with that shows up. And that's where I can really see, and Kessel would say it's the unconscious stuff. That's where I really see the like, oh, you can have what you want. Just, Mama, are you working hard? Are you struggling? Because if you work hard and you struggle, then you can get it. And I can see where that unconscious idea that I have to work hard has made its way into me setting up systems where, or making choices that have caused hard work for long periods of time, that then I can later on have some good. Maybe it's just me who's like, you notice you're like these patterns, like how did this thing get set up? And it's like, oh, it's the unconscious, out picturing of what I really believe. So this is why it's really useful to not just say you want something, but to notice what it is inside of you that you must be believing if that's the experience that you have. So our science of mind symbol goes from, the cause, the spirit, into the effect. But it's also important to notice if my effects, my experiences, are not what I want, how did they get there, and then build back up to the consciousness I want to create. So the next question for you is, what story do you want to empower? What story do you want to empower? And this is the place where we're not just a teaching that is just mental. So what is the story you want to build around prosperity and money and what it means for you personally, for this center, for your communities, for the people you serve, for the workplaces you're in? What is it you want to empower? And my strong encouragement is that you don't operate just from thought and circumstance, but that you remember that we are connected to something infinite, loving, intelligent, creative. There is no place in our lives, in our world, thank you, Cerise, for this, there is no place where the presence of God, no experience in my life, no challenge that I could face where the divine is not there. So that's what makes the story that you truly desire so precious, is what is the God idea of my abundance, of my experience, of my contribution. So the theme I've been working with for this year is fulfilled. And I will tell you, it's a good word for me, fulfilled, because it shows to me all the places where I'm in, chronic mild complaining, or, again, perhaps I'm just in my own little zone of this. And the other thing I really look at that's been up for me where I'm like, do these principles really work? Is I look at the political and social things in our world that, I'd like to be, there and then. I'd like them to be different. And I've got to look at what's the spiritual truth that I'm wanting to embody. And also, if I cannot find in me the spiritual willingness to just pause for a second and say the presence of God must be here, then any action I take won't be as effective as it will if I can know the spiritual truth first. So when I say what is the story you want to empower, you really want to look for what's the spiritual inspiration I long to be in, and then how will that play out? And the other piece that is the antidote to wanting, it's the capacity to have, to be satisfied. And that's why it's pretty wonderful that Reverend Jill has chosen as the theme for the whole year, practicing the presence. So God as presence means it's the infinite in this moment as everything. And if I can practice that, then wanting falls away. I can enjoy the delight of having. And what's beautiful is, in having and satisfaction and inclusion, it's not death, it's creative. So there's this difference between I want to make something happen and filled full with the presence of God, I notice that new ideas arise. So this is the other piece. It's subtle, but it's like, I'm not saying want nothing anymore. What I'm saying is let our desires arise from our sense of oneness with the divine, and then we'll be about the activities in social justice, or the creative things you want to do financially, or the spiritual gifts you want to give, or the poems you want to write. Like, we'll be about the business of the divine in the world, but we'll come from such a different place. And the final thing I'll say is the extra good news, because who doesn't want extra good news when it comes to the prosperity message? The extra good news is the law supports us. So you see the cause and effect. So there is the idea of the light bulb and then the light bulb. And the creation occurs by the power of the law. So it is our role as co-creators with the divine to tune into the idea, and then we trust that the law of life reveals that idea in experience. We do not have to make it happen. Dr. Michael would say we have to make it welcome. We have to be so in the cause, that's who we are, that the law will operate to reveal the effect. And that is such a precious, precious place for us to be. So your task for the week is to practice these principles. And I love how Reverend Jill and your community is dedicated to practice each week. So these are your things for you to focus on this week to put the message into action. Number one, where do you feel the wanting mind? Notice it. What core money story is keeping you stuck? And then next week you'll see more about the archetypes. But, become personally aware. Number two, what belief do you want to empower? So is it the qualities of fulfillment? Is it havingness? Like, what is it you want to empower? And then finally, actively engage with your chosen money story. So this is if you're a person who's engaging with the story that there is more than enough and that all can be supported in the divine, then behave like that. If you believe that generosity is natural, then be a giver. So put your behaviors matched up with what you desire. So do you feel that your money story is powerful? Well, good. Let's pray about it. So let us move to prayer. Yes. So how sweet it is for us to have been about the business of understanding and knowing that our stories are powerful. We rise up in our consciousness and enjoy our oneness with the divine, recognizing that love and wholeness and supply are the great realities of life itself. We recognize God is, and God is all there is. As me, Karen, as every beautiful being here for the Scottsdale Center for Spiritual Living, to all of the neighbors, friends, colleagues, family, workplaces, all the people that we are connected with, and then beyond to all beings, all people, all places. We recognize our oneness with life itself. And because we are one with life, I am so honored that this prayer is a blessing to all. I speak this word accepting that the deepening of our true story, that we walk in God, we express in God, that this is the foundation for our abundance, our prosperity, our giving, and our sharing. What I affirm is that this message is now making its way through the activities and choices of our lives, and because we know who we are a blessing to the world. So I give thanks that this is true. I'm grateful that this prayer is operated upon by law. I let it go, we let it be, and together we say, and so it is.